Does anybody actually read Star Trek comics? I mean, other than me. I do, but there's not a lot of people who do out there. There has been a consistent sort of subset of Star Trek comic collectors for years and years and years, and I have every comic book of Star Trek ever produced, which I'm one of the few out there with a full collection who has a full knowledge of the Star Trek comics history. But they're pretending that this new iteration is a success in the media, and like it's greater than ever before. I actually break down how these comic press releases do this type of thing and show you exactly the real numbers behind Star Trek, which is not really that good. And on top of that, it's not really something that's even keeping the people who are working on it working full time, which is really weird. If you have a brand like Star Trek, you'd think one, it'd go a little further, and two, you'd think that like the people working on it would at least get like some corporate wages, but they're in massive trouble from where it's actually coming down to, and this doesn't move the needle whatsoever. So let's talk about this. Please hit the like and subscribe button as we talk about all things Star Trek here. I really appreciate you guys doing this. This is going to be a deep dive into comic, of course, production and comic business, which I've been a longtime comic professional and science fiction writer. So I do this full time, and I make most of my living off of Amazon. But I have a crowdfund for my next trilogy, and this is a trilogy of novels, not comics. So make sure you got that. And this is a space exploration trilogy. I'm bringing back the feel of what Star Trek used to be when it was actually exploring strange new worlds, when it was a real sense of wonder out there, real sense of heroism. So this follows Captain Christopher Conley and his crew of the EAS Valiant as they are going out and going on adventures. Each novel has its own planet with its own problem that they address with a real science fiction concept, just like you'd get to get it's a full episode each time. And this is my answer. I've really done what I think is some of my best work ever, and I'd love for you to check this out. Get on this crowdfund; it's in the description below. Thank you guys for helping us out and making this go, and thank you for reading. It's very, very important. I appreciate all you guys who do so. All right, so this is it. The comic industry loves to declare victory, pretend things are far more successful than they actually are. IDW Publishing recently put out a press release regurgitated by comicbook.com that exemplifies how they put spin on topics and try to market based on fake success. Recently, IDW Publishing launched a new series called Star Trek The Last Starship after canceling their entire line of post-90s series comics that, despite winning awards in the industry, didn't seem to move the needle with fans. Now, they've been declaring victory on that over and over and over again for the past 3 years. They called the first one Star Trek, and then the next one Star Trek Defiant, and then they had like events that crossed over. So they called it like a full line, even though it was just 2 books really, and then they would make event crossovers like with all new number ones in it, like just like the same gimmicks the rest of the comic industry does. And like I said, it lasted about 3 years, and it was some of the worst fan fiction I've ever read. There's some channels that actually shill for that. But it was like Captain Sisko comes back from the wormhole, and he gets a crew, and like the crew is it's like he's got Scotty, he's got Tom Paris, he's got Beverly Crusher. It's like he just assembled like one person from every show. Terrible fan, and he's on a ship called the Theseus. So why is he not in charge of Deep Space Nine, and why doesn't he have the Defiant? Great question. And it was a very bizarre thing. Didn't work very well. These are some people who are propped up in the industry, Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, who we'll get into, who like got a little stint at Marvel. Everybody universally hates their books, like across comics. They are like known as some of the worst writers out there, and they keep getting this Star Trek gig because I guess of industry clout with the editor Heather Antos out there. And so that's what's happening over on that. Now that, like I said, died, and they canceled it pretty abruptly, which is interesting because they were like bragging about winning Hugo Awards and the stuff like that recently, and it's like, okay, I guess it's not going that well. Now, last year, IDW almost lost the license. Paramount was shopping it around for Star Trek comics to go somewhere else because IDW itself is embattled. It's in huge trouble and doesn't do well financially, so they're a risk of going out of business. What happened was Paramount couldn't find anybody who wanted to buy the license for their fee other than IDW, and so they ended up going back with them for another 5-year mission, I guess. And so this is what they do in the comic industry. They relaunch things with an all-new #1 first issue, and this last Starship was launched as another ongoing series by the same creative team as their last relaunch, so it's got the same writers as the ones that just failed after 3 years, right? But this one, they switch it, And this has a plot line that Captain Kirk's back from the dead, but it's a timeline that plays into the Byrne era established in Star Trek Discovery. So it's like, oh gosh, so now they're going to tie this stuff into Discovery. Yay. So comicbook.com was given this exclusive about this, and here's how this works. So the title of the article was Star Trek The Last Starship Sells Out. Now, they don't mean sells out like in the negative way. They mean that they sold out. Here's the article from comicbook.com, which was, quote, an exclusive, which means IDW just gave them a press release, and then they kind of regurgitated it, right? And that's it. And so they do this. There's about a few approved outlets: comicbook.com, CBR, AIPT, Screen Rant gets some because of Star Trek, and they think it. What they do is they clickbait it to make you think it's about the show. And then the other one's Comics Beat, and these they just cycle these 4 or 5 approved outlets for their, quote, exclusives, because they know they'll just shill for it. And that's exactly what this is here. So it sells out, and a second printing is on the way. That sounds really impressive, right? I'll tell you what they mean by that in the comic book industry. So, like my crowdfund, right? When I have my hardcovers right here, which is these are going to be gorgeous hardcovers with it's going to have beautiful trimmed edges, gold foiling on the where the lettering is. It's going to be beautiful stuff. Like I've never made anything this gorgeous in my life, and they're very costly to make. And so because of that, I'm going to print to order, right? And so when people order on my site here, and right now we've got about 10, 20 across the line. I'm going to print maybe 5 extra sets, right? And so then a couple people always invariably after the crowdfund campaign ends comes to me and goes, I didn't order it. Can I get it from you directly? And then I do that, right? And then once those are gone, it's print to order, so they're sold out. That's exactly how the comic book industry does things. They print lines of 5,000 or 10,000 copies for something like Star Trek, and then they take pre-orders ahead of time, months ahead of time, and it's sold out immediately because they don't want to keep stock of this stuff. They don't keep a lot of stock of what they got going on, like anybody else, and so it is always sold out, which is ridiculous. And so it doesn't always get a second printing, but that's becoming more and more often. Now what comic companies are doing more and more are they know that Star Trek generally has about 8,500 people who buy every Star Trek comic come hell or high water. It's been almost unchanging since 2007. I've tracked the numbers on this. And they don't give their numbers after 2021 anymore, which is when, once COVID hit, they don't actually give real numbers anymore. But they did up from 2007 to 2021, you could tell. And it was every non-first issue of Star Trek, no matter what it was selling about 8,500 copies. And a first issue sells about 12,000 to 15,000 copies. And so they know exactly what they do. So what they'll do is they'll kind of underprint to the low end. Maybe they'll do 12,000. And comic shops want some more of it because it's the first issue. And so they'll run a second print run of 3,000 to get it up to 15,000 rather than just running that 15,000 to start, which is what they used to. That way they can go to the media and say it's sold out, get people who are speculators on comics, because a lot of people within comics don't even read them. They just buy the ones they think are going to be rare, and then they put them in bags and boards, and then they try to hope that they're going to go up in value later. There's a lot of groups on that. And it's actually about 60% of people who buy comics are that at this point. So about 40% actually read. It's pretty bad. But that's what they do. And so now they're doing the second printing, acting like this is some strange thing that never happens. Pretty much is happening with every first issue of every major line in comics at this point, as long as that line's doing performing normally. And so they hailed this as if it's some crazy thing. And it's probably only sold about 15,000 copies. Now, for a comparison, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles IDW did last year, their number one, which they did that again, sold around 300,000 copies. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles keeps IDW alive. Star Trek, there's not a lot of new Star Trek readers that come out there. It's just the same collector base, including myself, who just have bought these forever and ever and ever. So there's no real win here. There's no real exciting thing that's happening here. This is just if a comic pre-sells 4,965 copies. They have 5,000 that they printed. And so they will, some people will ask for reorders or damages at that point. They're sold out at that point. And this is always what happens with every thing. So this is where it gets pretty interesting. So most people actually who buy number ones don't buy issue number two. Generally, there's a 40 to 60% drop off. People do just buy ones because they say number one first issue in comics. It's a collector's thing, like I said. And that's what they do because the number one might be valuable. It's really a weird sort of scammy thing. So we don't see that as much in books. Like in normal books, people just buy books, right? They don't do it just to collect typically. But this is it. The comic, they say, this is another one they said in the article, has proven to be the biggest Star Trek comic launch since the original relaunch at IDW. So they're talking about the relaunch at IDW in 2022, the one that I just told you about. So they've had a couple miniseries since then, right? A couple, they've had a Voyager one that came out. They had some Strange New Worlds ones that came out. They had some Lower Decks ones that came out. So those are obviously not going to sell as much as mainline Star Trek, right? And so this is the best-selling one since like 3 years ago. Okay. And then you only had like 3 other number one first issues that are in those like tertiary properties as well that people don't care enough about. So they look at how they're phrasing this without telling you. It's like, it's doing okay. but they're pretending like it's selling a lot, again, for speculators and collectors. So this is it. And this is how they fake things right here. So here's the real values of all this. So if they're selling 15,000 copies, which is possible here, that's what I believe based on what I saw old Star Trek number one first issues go for, right? Star Trek Year 5 was the last new ongoing series that they reported in April 2019. It sold 12,674 copies of its first issue. So 15,000, let's pretend it's more successful, right? Just a little bit. That's reasonable. Now, issue 2 of that suffered a severe drop-off to 8,834 units. Like I said, 40 to 60% drops off every single time. Once it got into issue 5, it was about 8,100 sales. And so Star Trek levels out around 8,000, right? Once it goes down to issue 15, it dropped all the way to 6,600 sales. There's just bleed off. Every single time you have an issue, people bleed off, but people don't buy. There's nobody who's buying issue 15 who didn't buy issue 14, right? And that's kind of just how it works. And so that's the plight of the comic book industry and why they relaunch all this stuff. So they say it's the bestseller since Star Trek number 1, 2022. And we can assume that also sold 12 to 15,000 units, and that this new relaunch did pretty much the same just based on the history of Star Trek. While it's hailed as a win, these are below, by the way, Marvel and DC cancellation thresholds. They would cancel this comic with those numbers. Not much of a win for IDW Publishing. So here's how the comic industry really breaks down where it gets interesting. A book retails for $4.99. A comic shop's average about 50% discount, and a distributor has a 50% discount from the publisher. IDW Publisher brings in about $1.25 in gross revenue per issue. The cost of printing is around 60 cents for runs of around 10,000 copies, meaning their net profit is about 65 cents per issue. That's right. So this is pretty funny. So that means 15,000 units generates around $9,000 in revenue. Okay? That's it. And so that's pretty interesting right there. Now, I know what their page rates are as well because I've produced a lot of comics myself. Professional art costs about $135 a page. A colorist will take about $50 per page. Letters cost about $10 a page. Writers also typically for Marvel and DC get paid $50 a page. I was told by somebody in the industry overnight that I'm overestimating this just based on Marvel numbers, but that IDW pays around $25 to $30 per page. And that's pretty interesting. There's a line editor, Heather Antos, who then they can get about $100 per page in overhead, which means it costs about $295 per page to produce the book. With 22 pages of the book, the cost is approximately $6,490. And then adding a couple of covers, which covers they sell, print for $300 or $500, and they've got a bunch of them, right? We can estimate the real production costs, let's say, around $7,500, perhaps more if they did more variant covers. So I don't know how many variant covers they did. I know they did at least 4, right? So with 22 pages per book, that cost is that. And so we know that 15,000 units generates about $9,000. So if their production cost is $7,500, they only made like $1,500, really, $1,500 off this. That's it. as a company. And then it declines. So if the second issue does sell about 8,000, 9,000, they'll be losing around $2,500 per issue. And then what happens is when the trade paperback comes out, it kind of goes back and it perhaps breaks even, right? And that's where they're at. So then I look at Lansing and Kelly and I'm like, are these guys even professional writers, right? So they're only making off of this about $1,100 per month per book. If they're making that $50 per page, if they're doing $25, they're only making about $500 per book. If they're lucky and have 3 books going in the industry, they're making around $3,000 a month from their writing. So maybe $5,000 a month, but that's again split by 2 people. So if that's split by 2 people, they're only making $2,500 a month at their peak. These guys are not professional writers; they're like barely making it, is what's coming on. This is crazy. I look at this and it's like, this is what people aspire to in comics, and I'm making far more than that as just doing it myself, right? And without these corporations giving me anything, right? Really crazy. Nobody be able to do this full time. So it looks like, I mean, they present it as a huge win for IDW Comics, and it's crazy. Now let's get into the content of this. So this is what they said to the Kelly and Lansing said in their statement. Unbelievable. The Last Starship is going to its second printing. It's not unbelievable. It's normal. Of all the Star Trek books we've done over the last decade, this is the most original, risk-taking, built for the comics medium alone. This is pretty funny because IDW's really been circling copy-pasting other concepts recently. It's not original or risk-taking. The whole concept is Captain Kirk came back from the dead. Well, that's already been done. This was a pretty good book, to be honest. But the Shatnerverse was done in novels where Captain Kirk came back from the dead, interacted with the next generation and the like. Was pretty interesting and entertaining. So now they're just doing it in Discovery mode. And what's interesting is the other Star Trek title right now that IDW has is a Voyager comic, and it's called Homecoming. And well, look, here's a novel, Voyager Homecoming, that was done as well. So they literally are just copy-pasting the novel-verse ideas that have been done 2-3 decades ago. And that's what's going on. So this is not original stuff. It's not interesting. And it's not doing very well either. It's all just churning the wheels just so the license brands just stays out there. And it's not making a ton of money for anybody involved. Like I said, not a lot of people buying it. And when you get down to 8,000 people and about, 30% people actually read it and only 60% just collect it and throw it in their boxes, you're talking that these books end up having less than 4,000 readers of Star Trek out there totally. And that's what's happening when it comes to Star Trek, which is kind of crazy because, again, I'm on Amazon. I sell about 1,000, 2,000 books a month on Amazon. And with that, I'm just like, holy crap, I have a lot more readers than Star Trek does, and it's pretty wild. Leave a comment down below with what you think about this. Hope that industry deep dive was interesting for you. Hit the like and subscribe button. Check out my Valiant Frontiers, guys. This is my new crowdfund. It has got 3 books to it, novels, The Soul Catchers, The Safe Place, and Time Bomb. Beautiful, beautiful science fiction that you'll love. It's in the description below. Thanks for supporting our channel, and we'll be back soon.